A Supreme Court rule most drivers don't understand can turn a simple traffic stop into a full-blown criminal case. And the scary part is, it often happens because of one small mistake you make with your own words. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to reveal could save you from years of legal trouble and thousands in legal fees. Hit that button now. Let's talk about the moment that changes everything. You're pulled over, lights are flashing behind you, your heart rate jumps, the officer comes up and asks for license and registration. You hand them over, you try to be polite, you're thinking, just let this be quick. Then the officer says it. We need to search your car. Most people think that sentence means the search is already happening, so they do what feels safe. They agree. They say, okay. They shrug. They step out and stay quiet, thinking silence means no. But in many cases, the officer is asking because they don't have the legal power to search yet. They need you to give it to them. So here are the 7 words you say, calmly and clearly. I do not consent to any searches. That's the whole line. No speech, no debate, no attitude. I do not consent to any searches. Say it like you're reading a grocery list. Now let me tell you why those 7 words are so powerful. First, they stop a consent search. That's a search based on your permission, not on a warrant. Second, they protect you later in court, because your lawyer can point to your clear refusal and argue the search was not voluntary or was not allowed. Third, they keep you from accidentally expanding what the officer can look through, because once you say yes, yes can get big fast. Now let's break this down in a way that actually helps you on the roadside. Segment 1 is the mindset. You're not trying to win an argument with a cop on the shoulder. You're trying to avoid giving away your rights. A traffic stop is stressful. It makes smart people do dumb things. The officer might be friendly. They might be calm. They might even joke with you. And that makes you relax. Then you start talking. And talking is where people mess up. Here's what just happened in a lot of real stops. The officer asks a question that sounds harmless. Do you mind if I take a quick look? Most people hear that as, if I say no, I'm guilty. But that's not how the law works. The Fourth Amendment is the part of the Constitution that protects you from unreasonable searches. A search usually means the government is looking in a place where you have privacy. Your car has less privacy than your house, but you still have rights. And one of the biggest ways people lose those rights is by consenting. So the first thing you do is give the clean refusal. I do not consent to any searches. Then you stop filling the silence. Because the silence is where the officer will try another angle. They might say, if you have nothing to hide, why not? They might say, it'll be faster if you let me look. They might say, I'm just trying to help you out. Here's the part nobody tells you. That line is not for your benefit. It's a tool to get you to agree. And once you agree, it can be hard to undo it. Now, let's make this real with a simple story. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. Imagine you're driving home from the range. You've got ear protection, targets, and maybe some ammo. Maybe you're carrying legally. Maybe there's a locked case in the trunk. You get stopped for a taillight. The officer sees the range bag or the target backer. They ask, any weapons in the car? You don't know what your state requires you to say. You don't want to mess up. Then they say, we need to search your car. If you say, okay, you just gave permission for the officer to go hunting. Maybe you did nothing wrong. But what if a buddy left a magazine in your bag from another state? What if you forgot a loose round rolled under the seat? What if you have a knife that's legal in one county and treated differently in another? What if you have a prescription bottle that's not labeled right? Most people don't get arrested because they're movie villains. They get arrested because real life is messy. And a search turns messy into evidence, so you don't play the helpful game. You say, I do not consent to any searches. Then you breathe. Then you keep your hands visible. Then you follow lawful instructions like stepping out if you're told to step out, but you don't volunteer your rights away. Now, a big warning. Refusing consent does not mean you get to be rude. It does not mean you get to lecture the officer. It does not mean you get to physically block anything. Never touch the officer. Never grab their hands. Never slam your trunk shut. You stay calm. You stay safe. You stay respectful. You just don't consent. Now, segment 2 is where most people get confused. They say, but they can search anyway. Sometimes, yes, but not always. There are different legal reasons police might search a car. Consent is one. Probable cause is another. A search incident to arrest is another. A protective sweep for weapons is another. An inventory search after towing is another. The reason matters. Because if the officer searches only because you consented, the court may treat it as legal, even if it feels unfair. But if you clearly refused and the officer searched anyway, now the officer must justify it with a different rule. And that is where cases get won and lost. This is why your refusal is not pointless. It forces the officer onto the record. It forces the situation into a lane. Either they have a real reason or they don't. Now let's talk about the biggest trick phrase. We need to search your car. Notice what they did there. They didn't ask, may I? They didn't ask, can I? They use the word need. That word is powerful. It makes you feel like you have no choice. So your job is to reset the moment. You don't argue about whether they need to. You don't say, no, you don't. You simply say, I do not consent to any searches. That line does not accuse them. It does not disrespect them. It simply states your decision. Now let's get practical. Here's a simple roadside script. Officer, we need to search your car. You, I do not consent to any searches. Officer, so you're refusing? You, I do not consent to any searches. Officer, if you're clean, you should cooperate. You, I understand. I do not consent to any searches. Then you stop. That's it. Notice what you did not do. You did not say, I guess. You did not say, okay, but don't go in the trunk. You did not say, only the front seat. You did not say, be careful with my stuff. Because those kinds of statements can create confusion, and confusion is dangerous. Now let's talk about one of the biggest hidden traps, the scope trap. When you consent, you may think you're consenting to a quick look, but consent can be interpreted broadly. If you say, sure, go ahead, many courts will treat that as permission to search anywhere in the car where the officer could reasonably look for what they claim they're searching for. And that can include opening containers. That can include bags. That can include compartments. That can include the glove box. So people accidentally give permission for a deep dive, and then they're shocked when the officer is opening things. They say, hey, I didn't mean that. But now the officer says, you said I could search. This is why you keep your answer short and clean. I do not consent to any searches. Now let's place CTA number 2 right here. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the 5 words that protect you when cops ask about your gun. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Segment 3 is about what to do next after you refuse, because refusing is only step 1. Step 2 is to stop volunteering information. This is the part that shocked me when I started watching body cam footage. People talk themselves into probable cause. They do it for the weirdest reasons. They feel nervous, so they try to explain why they're nervous. They feel pressured, so they try to sound innocent. They feel judged, so they start oversharing. They say things like, I don't have drugs, I swear. They say, my cousin was in the car earlier, maybe he left something. They say, I used to smoke, but not anymore. They say, I have a firearm, but it's legal, don't worry. Every one of those statements can create new questions, and more questions create more time. And more time creates more opportunities for the stop to expand. So keep it boring, give your license, registration, and insurance if required. Follow commands like stepping out. But do not start explaining your whole life. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Now let's talk about the question that protects you after the refusal. Am I free to go? That question matters because a traffic stop is a seizure. It's not an arrest, but you are not free to leave until the officer says you are. So when the officer is done with the reason for the stop, you want to know if the stop is over. If they say yes, you leave. If they say no, then the officer is saying you're being detained longer. That's a big deal, because in general, police can't stretch a stop longer than needed just to go fishing. They need a real reason to extend it. You don't argue this roadside. You simply ask the question, am I free to go? Then you listen. If they say, not yet, your next move is to stop talking, because now the detention is a legal issue that gets handled later, not roadside. Now segment 4 is where gun owners need to be careful. What if you have a firearm in the car? First, know your state's rules. Some states require you to inform. Some do not. This is not one size fits all. Second, keep your hands visible. Third, do not reach. Fourth, do not start moving items around to show the officer. If you are ordered to keep your hands on the wheel, do it. If you are ordered to step out, do it. Your job is to be safe and calm. Now here's what most people get wrong with firearms and searches. They think, if I say I have a gun, they can search the car. Not automatically. Owning a firearm does not erase the Fourth Amendment, but the officer may do certain safety steps. They may ask you to step out. They may ask where the firearm is. They may separate you from the firearm. They may do a limited protective search of the passenger area for weapons if they have specific reasons to think safety is at risk. The key is this. You do not confuse safety procedures with consent to a full search. You can comply with safety instructions and still refuse consent. I do not consent to any searches. Now, segment 5 is about the words that get you in trouble. Here are some phrases that sound smart but can backfire. Do you have a warrant? That question sounds powerful. But in car searches, warrants are not always required. So the officer may say, I don't need one. And now you're stuck in a debate you can't win roadside. Another dangerous phrase is, I'd rather you didn't. That's weak. It sounds like you're open to being talked into it. Another dangerous phrase is, okay, but don't search my trunk. Now you've given partial consent, and now everyone will argue later about what was allowed. Another dangerous phrase is, "Go ahead, I have nothing to hide." That one hurts people all the time, because it doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what the court thinks you allowed. So keep it clean. I do not consent to any searches. Now let's talk about what happens if the officer searches anyway. This is the moment where people make the biggest mistake of all. They physically resist. They try to stop the search by stepping in the way. They grab a door handle. They close a trunk lid. They start yelling. Do not do that. Even if the search is illegal, you don't fight it with your hands. You fight it with a lawyer. If you physically interfere, you can get arrested even if the search was wrong. So the best path is calm compliance with commands and clear refusal of consent. Now let's place CTA number 3 right here. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the gun owners who get these updates first. Click subscribe. Segment 6 is about the probable cause claims, because officers might say something to justify a search. They might say they smell marijuana. They might say they smell alcohol. They might say they saw something in plain view. They might say you look nervous. They might say you're giving inconsistent answers. The mistake is trying to argue the facts right there, because when you argue, you usually talk more, and talking more gives them more. Instead, you keep the same plan. I do not consent to any searches. Then you stop talking. If they search anyway, you don't consent by helping. Don't open compartments for them unless you're ordered to. Don't start moving bags around. Don't say, "Let me show you." If you do, the officer may later claim you consented after all. Now, segment 7 is the damage control plan. Let's say the officer asks again and again. They keep pushing. This is where you can repeat the line without sounding like a robot. Here are a few calm variations that keep the same meaning. I do not consent to any searches. I'm not giving consent to any search. I don't agree to any searches. Pick one and stick with it. Consistency matters. The more consistent you are, the harder it is to twist your words later. Now let's do a full hypothetical from start to finish so you can hear it. You get stopped for speeding. Officer asks for license and registration. You hand them over. Officer asks, "Where are you coming from?" You can keep it simple. From work, from the range, from a friend's house. Short answer. Officer asks, "Where are you going?" You answer short, "Home." Officer asks, "Any drugs or weapons in the vehicle?" If your state requires firearm disclosure, follow your state's rule. If not, be careful about volunteering. Then the officer says, "We need to search your car." You respond, "I do not consent to any searches." Officer says, "Step out." You step out. Officer says, "Wait here." You wait. Officer searches anyway, or maybe they don't. If they hand you a ticket and give your documents back, you ask, "Am I free to go?" If they say yes, you leave. If they say no, you stay calm, stop talking, and ask for a lawyer if it turns into arrest or interrogation. That's the clean path. Now, here's what most people get wrong about being polite. They think refusing consent is being difficult. It's not. It's using your rights. You can refuse consent politely. You can even say, "Respectfully, I do not consent to any searches." But if you want the pure 7 words, keep it simple. I do not consent to any searches. Now, one more warning, because this is huge. Do not lie. Lying can create a new crime. If you don't want to answer questions, you can keep answers short. Or you can say, "I'm not going to answer questions." But don't make up stories, don't guess, don't ramble. Now let's place CTA number 4 right here. This information could literally expire after January 2026. Subscribe now because the next video explains exactly what you need to do before that deadline hits. Now we're in the closing stretch. I want to summarize the key mistakes in a way you'll remember. Mistake 1 is accidental consent. You don't have to say yes to consent. You can consent by your actions. If you step back and say, "Go ahead," that's consent. If you open the trunk for them, that's consent. If you hand them the keys and say, "Here," that's consent. So don't do those things. Mistake 2 is trying to negotiate the search. Okay, but not the trunk. Okay, but not my bag. Okay, but be quick. That creates confusion. Mistake 3 is arguing the law roadside. The officer doesn't have to be convinced. The officer just has to write a report that sounds good later. Don't help them write it. Mistake 4 is oversharing. People confess to things they didn't even know mattered. They say, I had a beer earlier." They say, "My buddy left his stuff in my car." And they say, "I used to have a medical card." And they say, "Oh, well, I got a gun, but I'm legal." And sometimes those statements are harmless. Sometimes they become the entire case. So keep it short. Mistake 5 is physical resistance. Never do it. Now, I want you to picture this in your head. You're sitting in your car. You hear the words, "We need to search your car." You feel the pressure. You feel the fear. You feel that urge to say yes just to end the moment. That's the moment you slow down. You take one breath. And you say the line, "I do not consent to any searches." Then you stop. You don't fill the silence. You don't debate. You don't argue. You don't try to be funny. You just hold the boundary. Now, final takeaway in 2 sentences. If police ask to search your car, your best protection is a clear refusal of consent and calm behavior. Say, "I do not consent to any searches," then stop talking and handle disputes later with a lawyer. If this helped you, subscribe for the next one, because I'd rather you learn this now than learn it in a courtroom. People you love ride in your car too, and your choices at a stop affect them. Final disclaimer in simple terms. This video is general education, not legal advice. Every state is different, and the facts matter a lot. If you're dealing with a real stop, a real charge, or a real investigation, talk to a qualified attorney in your area.